Alrighty, team. Grant Irwin with KIPP Northeast Denver Leadership Academy here. So this is kind of the introductory video to several other videos that we have, and actually assignment that we have coming. The point of this video is to explain a big part of what we do, and a big part of our success, and that is, no matter what it is, like really looking at what is the bar that we're going for rigor, and then how do we backward plan from that. And for this, we're going to talk specifically about the ACT mainly, but also I'll tie in the advanced placement test. But honestly, this can be used, this exact same process can, and I think should be used for backward planning for any bar that a school sets, whether that be, Common Core, Park, SAT, whatever it is. So real quick, I want to clarify a few, I think, misconceptions or what this is and maybe what it isn't. So first of all, I put a lot of stake in this last year. Instead of focusing all of our time during PDs on, and we did do this, it's an important part, but we started with this instead of things like checks for understanding and, guided practice techniques and all that. And the reason why is this: I felt like unless we really set the bar high for rigor and what we wanted from kids, all that other stuff is meaningless if our bar is wrong. So if we got great checks for understanding, but it's based on, a bar that's off or too low, then that's kind of pointless. So that is why we're starting our PD with this, of like really making sure that we understand the bar. And then backward planning, and this is the key word, I think, in all of this. Backward planning to integrate all of this. We're not teaching to a test. We're not doing test prep. In fact, the goal of this, if we do it well, is to avoid test prep, because I'll just say now, like, that's not going to work. So backward planning effectively for this really helps us fill in gaps. And the example that I always use, and I want to use again, is this. And I'm going to use quite a few math examples just because that's what I taught, so I can really speak to that to highlight some of these points and some failures that I had as a teacher through this process. So one of the things as an Algebra 1 teacher and even pre-algebra, I always taught, the coordinate plane, graphing points on the coordinate plane and all that. And so I thought, okay, if I need to teach my kids this, that way it'll help them on all of math throughout college, AP tests, and the ACT. Well, I was taking a practice ACT test one time, and I saw a problem that said, some kid starts off at point 15, negative 32. They walk 7 blocks west and 25 blocks north. What point are they at? And I just realized, like, holy crap, I never thought to ask that type of question to get kids to practice the coordinate plane. That was at a much higher rigor level than I had taught, and I never taught kids northeast and south and west on the coordinate plane. And so I just realized, like, wow, I should have, when I was teaching the coordinate plane, I should have just taught this then. It would have upped my rigor, and it would have got kids to be successful if it was asked that way on the ACT. How I was assessing it was not in line with how it showed up on a practice ACT. So that was a good example of, like, okay, I need to do a better job backward planning from the high bar of the ACT, so that whenever I teach this, I'm teaching it to that bar. One of the things that I hear, I honestly think far too often, is the ACT test isn't rigorous enough. It's multiple choice, it's more skill-based, it's not rigorous enough, so we want to teach our kids to a higher level. I agree, first of all, but I think where so many schools go wrong is, the first thing I would say is if it's too easy, then we should have all of our kids hitting that 21 or higher, for the score. And even the best performing charter schools, are a long way from every kid reaching that 21. KIPP has a really good goal of 75% of our kids hit 21 or higher on the ACT, and we're long ways. Most KIPP schools and some of the best schools that I know are a long ways from that. So it's hard for me to really entertain the idea of, the test is too easy, it's not rigorous enough, Well, if that's the case, then our kids should be doing a lot better on it. So to me, that's a non-starter. I still do view, though, that the ACT is the floor. Yes, we want to teach to a higher level, especially junior, senior year, obviously, as we get them ready for college. We want to teach to a higher level than just the ACT, but we got to start there. If we're not reaching that goal yet, like, let's at least start there, reach that goal, and then we'll talk about setting the bar even higher. The other thing that I want to clarify, some would say, oh, let's just focus on advanced placement tests because that's really going to set a more rigorous bar than the ACT. And I agree, yes, the content sets a more rigorous bar, but what I would say to that is you need to do both. Just focusing on the ACT isn't going to get your kids to be successful in AP classes. And just focusing on AP, saying, oh, it's a more rigorous thing, is not necessarily going to translate to success on the ACT. And I actually have some data from my old school, especially in science, that shows that. And I've seen that with Park now with some schools where they say, oh, Park and Common Core are more rigorous. If we focus on that, surely that will translate to success on other tests on the ACT. And I think people are realizing as they've done that over the last year or two that that is not necessarily the case. It's a gamble that I'm not willing to bet on. And again, I have some data that I think to disprove that. So we're going to focus on both. It's a lot more work, yes, but it's what our kids need. And we're gonna make sure we do that effectively at our own school. The last thing I'll say quickly is, at the end of the day, some people, and we're not a test prep school. If we do that, our kids are going to fail in college without question. But the way I look at it is, we want our kids to graduate from college. What's the best way to do that? Get them into better, more selective colleges. Why? Because if you look at the minority and poverty kids that come from higher poverty areas, if you look at the graduation rates at selective schools versus non-selective, huge difference. So if we can get our kids into more selective schools, better chance of getting the supports that they need, financial aid that they need. And how do we get kids into more selective schools and better colleges? Primarily two things. There's an X and a Y axis of ACT on one, GPA on the other. Is that all the equation? No, but it really does come down to those two things as being the most important things. So we focus on both at our school. All right, I'm going to go through this very quickly. So again, this is part of an assignment. This is an introductory video to why we're doing and kind of what we're doing. We'll have specific videos that really break down this process. So I want to just go through this very, very quickly. So what we're going to have you guys do is for every, we're going to start with the interims. For every interim question, you are going to go through it and you're going to break down three things. The knowledge that kids need to do well on the question, the skills that they need to do well on that question, and finally, the process that you went through and that our kids will need to do to be successful in that. Let me go through each one of those quickly. So knowledge. These are simple things, like it's what kids need to know. So, on the English section, they need to know grammar rules. It's, a lot of kids say, well, that's what sounds the best, or that's what sounds right. That's not going to lead them to success on it. They need to know some of the rules. Reading examples like, if a question's asking for the main idea, they may also ask it in some way of synonym. So it may ask for the central idea. It may ask for the primary purpose. That's knowledge that kids need to have, where it's like, that's all asking the same thing. So that's knowledge that they have. Vocab for every single test is a must. That, again, that's knowledge that they need to have. Things like in math where it's like slope is a rate of change. And there are a lot of conceptual, deeper understandings to slope and rate of change that kids just need to know and understand. And then like in science, the kids just need to know like the difference between an independent and dependent variable. There's some knowledge there that they just need to learn. Skills, that's like what kids can do. So a skill for reading would be like kids can use context clues to identify the meaning of a word that they don't know. That is a skill that they need to practice, that where even if they don't have the knowledge on that word, if they have the skill, they may be able to determine that word. Things like in math, just finding the slope, calculating rate of change in science as well. So those are some skills. Process. This is one that a lot of schools skip on, and I actually think it's one of the most important, especially for teaching. Process is it does include test taking strategies. That is part of it, but it is not that as well. It is like, what are the habits that kids need to do and that we did to solve these problems, and what's like the metacognition that we did without even really noticing it sometimes. So let me give you a few examples. On the English test, a process might be, once you think you have the correct answer selected, you take that answer and you replace it for the underlined portion on the test, and you reread it with your answer in it. That's a process that good test takers go through to help increase their chances of getting the answer correct. For reading, one of the things I do when I take the reading test is I visualize things as I go. And I think oftentimes our kids are so focused on just fluency, pronouncing the words, that they sometimes forget to immerse themselves in the story or in the text and like really visualize things. So if it's talking about a character and it's using imagery or descriptive language, I visualize what that character looks like. That way that image sticks with me instead of just the words. In geometry, like on the math test, if it's a geometry question, I oftentimes find myself like, it'll say like the angle measure of A is 74 degrees. I'll go to the diagram and I'll say, oh, is that angle measure given in the diagram? If so, I'll just cross out those words because it's like, I can just look at the diagram. I don't need those words anymore. But again, that's a process that I go through as a test taker. And then like on science, same thing. When I read the process that I go through as a test taker, when I read the science test, I oftentimes bounce back and forth between the text and the diagrams. And again, that's what our kids should be doing. Therefore, we just need to name that when we go through and do this, so that we can teach our kids these good habits and processes as well. All right, I'm going to stop talking because the other videos really get into the nitty-gritty details of this. Know that you're going to get feedback on this. This is a first attempt. So just really, there will be several, put it this way, plan on spending quite a few minutes, and you'll see in the videos, we spend like 10 minutes at first on like one problem. Eventually you'll be able to do this in, 2 to 4 minutes on every single problem on the ACT or interim. So it'll take longer, but really spend the time doing this. Take this assignment seriously. If you have questions, please reach out to me, and I'll help you at least get started. But I want you to do this on your own first, okay? So again, check out the assignment, enjoy this process, and welcome to our team.